Okay, so have you ever inherited something?
Right.
Like maybe it was your grandma's recipe book or a lucky coin. But imagine inheriting an actual piece of land, not just any land, but land that was actually promised to your ancestors by like a divine being.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about pressure.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what we're diving into today. We're looking at the book of Joshua, chapter 16 through 18.
Okay.
And this is where the Israelites are finally entering the promised land, the land that God promised them.
Right.
And now they have to figure out who gets what.
Yeah, you got it. And it's not just about you know, drawing lines on a map, right? It's about so much more. This is about their identity, their security. It's a sign of God's favor. It's basically the foundation of a whole nation. You know what I mean?
Exactly. It's a huge deal. And we're zeroing in on 3 tribes in particular: Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin. Now, Ephraim and Manasseh were sons of Joseph.
Oh, okay.
So there's some family history there. Right.
Right. Right. And understanding that whole dynamic is key here, right?
Right.
Because it's going to add this whole layer of tension to how this whole inheritance process unfolds. It's just a good reminder that even within a chosen people, there are going to be internal power struggles.
It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows.
No.
After they crossed the Jordan, huh? So let's start with Ephraim. Chapter 16 kind of paints a picture of their inheritance prime real estate,
Uh-huh.
but not without complications.
Of course not, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it? They get this amazing fertile land. But the book of Joshua specifically says what's it say? They did not drive out the Canaanites who lived in Gezer. Now, the Canaanites, just as a reminder, were the people who already lived in the land.
Mm-hmm.
And this little detail,
Yeah.
huge, huge repercussions.
So they inherit this land, but it's not exactly empty.
Right.
And what happens when you've got 2 groups claiming the same territory?
Yeah, it makes those family squabbles we just talked about seem like child's play.
Right.
Because the text even says that the Canaanites became forced laborers, which tells us a lot about the power dynamic at play.
Yeah.
This wasn't just about claiming land on a map, right? It was about the messy realities of conquest and coexistence, I guess.
Yeah.
And the potential for conflict that just simmers beneath the surface.
And that potential for conflict. Yeah. That is going to be a recurring theme, unfortunately. And speaking of complicated inheritances, Manasseh's story takes another turn.
Okay.
And this time it's a family affair,
Oh,
with both sons and daughters staking a claim.
oh, wow.
Right.
That's getting interesting.
So imagine being one of those daughters, right?
Yeah.
Mala, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah having to stand up and remind the leaders, hey, we have a right to this land too. We're part of this family.
Right.
That takes some guts.
It does.
Right.
Yeah.
And it really highlights how, even in this ancient context, ideas about inheritance and who was considered deserving were being challenged. It wasn't always a simple patriarchal system.
Exactly. Exactly. And what's so fascinating about this is that this whole idea of who deserves what and who gets to decide is still so incredibly relevant today and on a much broader scale.
Right.
For example, I mean, think about modern debates about land rights, immigration, even who gets access to, resources like clean water.
Yeah.
These echoes of these ancient divisions, they're still felt.
It's like looking through a window to the past, and you're seeing reflections of our own present.
That's true.
Isn't it?
It's true.
Now, both Ephraim and Manasseh ran into some trouble, fully establishing control over their land, especially when they encountered, those Canaanites with their iron chariots in the valleys.
Oh, yeah.
It seems even back then, technology played a role in territorial dominance.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it, iron chariots. That was the cutting edge military tech back then.
Right.
It's just a stark reminder that even in ancient times, those who could wield the most advanced tools often had the upper hand of these conflicts. And sadly, that pattern, that kind of repeats itself throughout history, doesn't it?
That's a chilling thought. So we've covered Ephraim and Manasseh, 2 brothers, both with their own set of complications when it came to their inheritance. So where does that leave their relative Benjamin?
Well, Benjamin's inheritance, it's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because it's all about the location.
Okay.
If you think about it, right? Ephraim and Manasseh, they got those nice big slices from the middle of the cake, right?
Right.
Benjamin, he got that sliver right between them. Strategically valuable,
Yeah.
but also incredibly vulnerable.
Hemmed in on all sides. I bet that made for some interesting family dynamics, especially during the holidays.
Oh, yeah.
But seriously, being surrounded like that must have had a huge impact on them, on their development as a tribe.
Oh, absolutely. And it's no coincidence that within this territory, you've got some really, really significant landmarks, right?
Right.
I mean, you've got Jericho with its whole impenetrable walls thing.
Yeah.
And then you've got Jerusalem,
Oh, wow.
a city that would eventually become, the heart of their entire nation.
Mhm.
These aren't just names on a map, right? These represent like strategic power points and
Yeah.
spiritual centers
Right.
that are going to shape the destiny
Yeah.
of like the entire Israelite nation.
Talk about a legacy, right?
I know, it's a big deal.
And speaking of maps, the book of Joshua gets incredibly specific when it's describing Benjamin's inheritance. It's like they were using GPS coordinates centuries before GPS even existed.
Right. And there's a reason for that, though.
Look.
Remember, in this world, land equals power. It equals security. It equals survival.
Yeah.
Clearly defined boundaries. They weren't just about like being meticulous or something. They were crucial to, minimizing disputes
Right.
and establishing a sense of order in a world where resources were scarce.
It's like drawing a line in the sand and saying, this is ours. And I can only imagine the kind of conflicts that could come from like a misplaced boundary stone or, a contested water source.
Exactly, exactly. And these issues, they weren't confined to the past either. I mean, think about modern day conflicts. Over borders, over resources, over, who gets access to water.
Right.
These echoes of these ancient tensions,
Yeah.
they're still so alive today.
It makes you wonder if we're all that different from those who came before us,
Totally.
I mean, we might have smartphones and satellites and stuff, but
Yeah.
those fundamental human desires for security, for belonging, for a piece of something to call our own, I don't know, it hasn't changed all that much, has it?
It's so true. It's a really insightful observation. And it highlights why these ancient stories,
Yeah.
they still resonate. It's not just about dusty old maps and battles that nobody remembers anymore. It's about the human condition.
Yeah.
It's about that like enduring struggle for identity and belonging.
Right.
And the challenges of like building a society, in a world where resources are often perceived as finite.
It's like holding up an ancient mirror
Yeah.
and seeing reflections of our own modern dilemmas just staring back at us. So we've got these three tribes, Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin, each with their own unique slice of the promised land.
Right.
But we've also seen how this seemingly, straightforward act of dividing up the territory is it's fraught with complexity
Cool.
and potential for conflict.
Yeah. And it's important to remember, too, that these accounts, right, they weren't written in a vacuum.
Right.
They were recorded, they were copied, they were passed down through generations,
Oh, for sure.
often with their own agendas.
Right.
And interpretations are kind of woven in, you know what I mean?
So we're not just dealing with ancient history here.
Right. But how that history was remembered, how it was interpreted, sometimes even like manipulated
Totally.
over time to suit different narratives.
Exactly. And that just adds a whole other layer of complexity to like our understanding of these events.
Yeah.
We have to remember we're looking at the past through multiple lenses, right?
Right, right.
And each one kind of shapes our perception of what happened
Right.
and why it even matters,
It's like we're trying to solve this puzzle,
Oh, right.
right?
Totally.
But some of the pieces are missing.
Right.
And others have been like reshaped over time,
Yeah. It's a great analogy. And
Yeah.
it's why, we just can't approach these texts with like this sense of absolute certainty, right?
Yeah.
We have got to be comfortable sitting with a little bit of ambiguity.
Yeah. Acknowledging that there are multiple perspectives
Right.
and interpretations to consider.
It's a good reminder that history, it isn't just like a collection of facts, right? It's more like a tapestry
Yeah,
that's woven from all these countless individual stories.
totally.
And each one has its own biases and its own blind spots.
Of course, yeah.
But even with those limitations, I mean, there's still so much that we can learn
Absolutely.
from engaging with these ancient texts.
And one of the most important takeaways, I think, is how these ancient stories about land and inheritance and conflict, I mean, it's still so relevant.
It's mind-blowing.
It's like it's happening right now.
Yeah.
Land disputes, resource allocation, indigenous rights. I mean, these are all playing out right now on a global scale.
It's like we're still wrestling with the same fundamental questions, right? About belonging, about power, about responsibility.
It's the same stuff.
Yeah.
Different players, much bigger stage.
Right, exactly. Okay, so we've covered Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin's inheritance.
Yeah.
We talked about the challenges, the conflicts, and then, the bigger picture of what it meant to establish a nation.
Yeah.
What's the one thing you really want our listener to take away from all of this? Like, what's that kernel of wisdom that we can apply to our own lives, even though this happened thousands of years ago?
I think it comes down to this idea that inheritance isn't just about what we receive,
Right.
but about the responsibilities that come with it,
Mm,
right? Whether it's land or a legacy or even just like a set of values.
yeah,
What we inherit, it shapes who we are
right.
and what we pass on.
It's like holding something in trust, isn't it?
Exactly. Yep.
Like, we have this responsibility to honor the past,
Yeah.
navigate the present,
Uh-huh.
and consider the impact that our actions are going to have on the future.
And it's a lot bigger than us.
It's true.
It's about recognizing that we are part of something so much larger
Right.
and that our actions have these ripple effects, that extend way beyond just us.
So, to bring it full circle, right?
Okay.
If you were to inherit a piece of land today, like right now, what would be your first thought?
Hmm.
What would be your responsibility to that inheritance?
Well, I mean, beyond the practicalities of ownership and property lines and all that,
Yeah, yeah.
I'd want to understand its history.
Yeah.
Who lived there before?
Uh,
What stories could the land tell?
Yeah.
Because I think true ownership, true inheritance,
Yeah.
it requires that we acknowledge the past and we engage with the present
Right.
and we consider the impact our actions will have on the future.
That's a really powerful thought to leave our listeners with today. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. It's been quite a journey.
My pleasure, as always. Happy to do it.
Welcome to Charlie and Mia's podcast. We're embarking on an exciting journey to read through the entire Bible in just 1 year. Every day, we dive into Scripture, exploring its meanings and how it applies to our lives today. We invite you to join us on this incredible adventure of learning and discovery. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode.